Hello, my name is Gerome Rothman, and I'm an organizer at Tozen Union. For those of you who don't know us, Tozen Union is a labor union here in Japan, where our office is in Tokyo in Shinjuku-ku, but we are a national union, and we are a multicultural, multinational labor union. We have members throughout Japan in many different industries and in many different categories of work, such as people who work full-time, part-time, on fixed-term contracts, on independent, so-called Yomo contracts. Our membership pretty much runs the gamut. Okay? And today, after a very long hiatus, we're restarting our Tozen Daigaku series. Tozen Daigaku at one point was a very popular series within our union, and we also gained a viewership outside the union, where we would go over legal issues, issues organizing unions at the workplace, and also just general conversation and content about different social issues that Japanese workers face, or workers in Japan, I should say more accurately, face. Unfortunately, we took a long hiatus, but we're back, and today we have what I think is a very special and hopefully fun presentation for you. And Oren, if you would, please show us the title screen. Okay, call it Gerome versus the Bots. So, several years ago, Oren and I did a Consultations Tozen Daigaku. That is to say, a Tozen Daigaku about what you could expect if you came to Tozen for a consultation, either as a member or somebody who's not yet a member. And some of the things that you can do to help that consultation be successful. So we identified 10 areas that can create awkward moments in consultations that we would ask people to avoid, and also accompanying that advice on how to have a more successful setup for those consultations. In the interim, we had this huge development in technology that has been called AI. And so now some of you are coming to your consultations armed with the information that an AI chatbot has told you. And that has created some very interesting possibilities and also some problems. So what we want to do today is a presentation to talk you through some of these problems and possibilities and give some advice about how to use these and what to be looking out for when you use these, and also just a general orientation about why we should be skeptical, but also why we should how we should best use them. So, Oren, if you would go on to the next slide. Okay. So I want to start with a public service announcement about the Tozen Daigaku series. The reason why we went into a hiatus is that our goals were perhaps a little ambitious about how we would produce these videos. We would often get a panel of guests or an expert. We would live stream them, and it would be quite a lot of effort, and well worth the effort because we had some very good series and very good presentations, but eventually it became a little bit cumbersome given some of our scheduling requirements here at the union. So what we've decided we're going to do is restart the series, but maybe try to do something a little more realistic. So for example, every month we would do a 30 to 40 minute quick hit, and that's what we're going to try to do today. So it's not the quickest hit, but it's not 2 or 3 hours. And then maybe every quarter or every half year, we can do one of the more bigger deals, one of the bigger productions where we get a panel or a lawyer for some in-depth look, and we would live stream it and get questions live. So for today, it's just me talking to you about the technologies that concern, the technologies that are called AI and how it might impact, for better or for worse, your labor consultation. And hopefully, if this goes well, we will do one of these every month, get better at them, and eventually resume having read the live streams as well. So that's what we're going for. We haven't decided these things yet, but stay tuned. Can we move on to the next? Okay. Thank you, Oren. So what I'm not going to do is make some big condemnation, AI is terrible and I hate it, or an endorsement of the technologies and services that people call AI. I have my own opinions about the technologies, but that's not what we're doing here. And nor are we going to talk about the ethical, environmental, or labor-related issues with the technology itself. All of that stuff is absolutely fascinating to me. AI is, of course, controversial inside the union, outside the union. People have strong opinions about it, as I said before. I do as well. But I want to try to get away from this, oh God, don't use this, because I don't know that that's even realistic advice at this point, if that's what I was going to try to do. So instead, what I would like to do is give you advice about how you're using this when you are about to approach Tozen for a consultation, or any other union for a consultation. There are issues about AI usage in the workplace. Some of you are writing your emails with AI, for example. We're not going to really address that. It might come up, but that's a separate topic. So really just focus on when you've got some problem at work, some legal question, what is happening when you're talking to the bots. Can we move on to the next slide? Okay. So I think I already said that, but yeah, so I'm going to address the specific issue of people coming to Tozen with consultations using LLMs based chat bots. So for example, Gemini, ChatGPT. Can we move on? Okay. So I decided to start this by asking Gemini what an LLM is, a large language model. And according to Gemini, an LLM is a type of artificial intelligence built on deep neural networks trained on vast data sets to understand, process, and generate human-like text. It powers modern generative AI tools and chatbots such as ChatGPT, Claude, and Gemini. So there's a couple of things that I want to point out. Like, I clicked the link for the Wikipedia entry that was attached to this explanation, and nowhere in that link did it say that an LLM is a type of artificial intelligence, or any kind of intelligence. So the Gemini definition is useful for our purposes today, but I'm going to circle back to why I chose to quibble with the definition, because I think it actually is relevant to some of the problems you might have if you ask it a question about labor law, for example. Can we move on? Okay. So let's ask Gemini something else. And here's a question that you might ask it. I live and work in Japan. I'm planning to have a child. What are my rights at the workplace? And so let's move on to the next slide. Let's read Gemini's answer. Okay. So if you look at Gemini's answer, I'm not going to read it out word for word. But I'll read some features of it. It says, in Japan, working parents have strong government-mandated protections that apply regardless of nationality or whether you're full-time, part-time, or a contract worker. And it goes on from there. You can read the slide yourself. And that's only the beginning. It then gives this very comprehensive list of different types of leave you can get, different types of payments you can get from government insurance policies, and it is a fairly standard answer to a question like that. So what I want to do now is evaluate the response. So can we move on to the next slide? Okay. So the first thing I want to say, and this might surprise you, given some of the skepticism, is good job, Gemini. It does give us an accurate and comprehensive overview of rights and protections for employees in Japan. But I have a question. What about if you're on a so-called Gerome Rothman contract? So some of the employers, they don't think of themselves as employers, but treat you as an independent business. And in that case, if management doesn't recognize your contract as an employment contract, that changes things significantly. So in that case, for example, you're not paying into social insurance, Shakai Hoken, or in Koyo Hoken, the employment insurance. And so some of those financial benefits aren't available to you. And of course, leave is an employment thing, not an independent contractor thing. So you might be thinking, okay, fine, I'll ask Gemini about that. And then Gemini will explain to me what those differences are. And that's true. I did that, I followed up, and then Gemini gave a more conservative answer. So let's sort of talk about why there are some problems. Can we move on? So what is the real problem here? So first of all, in the sixth word of the definition of, in the sixth word of the answer, it has the word strong protections. And that's a very subjective thing. So are the strong protections applying to every single one of the benefits? Do the strong protections, are the legal mechanisms that you would take advantage of to try to force an employer that's not granting your legal rights? Are they easy to use? Are they expensive? What do they mean when they say strong? And it doesn't really get into that unless you ask follow-up questions. And the second thing is, I pointed out about the Gerome Rothman contract thing. You say, well, I'll ask that follow-up question, but let's be honest with each other. Do you know every follow-up you're supposed to ask? It's not uncommon for people to contact us with a problem and not know what kind of contract they're on, and there's no shame in that. But if you don't know to ask that question, then you might walk away from this with a sense that your protections are stronger than they are. So this is one of the things that contributes to it overstating protections and talking in a tone that communicates things as cut and dry when they're not. So let's move on. Okay, so you probably noticed that I'm being a little cagey, right? So I am pointing out that there are the protections might not be as strong as Gemini is making it sound, but I'm not being ultra specific with you about the ways in which employers unfortunately frequently get around some of the legal protections that the law mandates. And so you're probably saying, well, wait a minute, what was wrong with Gemini's answer? Why won't you tell me all of these ways? And the answer to that question is no. Of course, I can talk to you about that in a consultation, but there's no benefit to the union to get on the internet and educate the employer in how to get around your legal protections, right? That's not something that we want to do. And that's actually a big part of why Gemini, at least not without a lot of prompting, doesn't confidently tell you about the limitations, about the ways in which management can get around it, loopholes, the cumbersome nature sometimes of enforcement mechanisms. And why doesn't Gemini anticipate that when it gives you the response? And a big part of it is the training data. So back in the bad old days, before AI, just the good old days, I don't know, if I had a question about a law that I didn't understand, I would just do a Google search. And that was back when Google worked well. And you would often get management-side law firms being very strong and strident about the rights of workers. And they were actually, just like Gemini, very good explanations. But you have to ask yourself, why are management-side law firms so strident about talking about the protections of workers? And the answer is because they want to scare employers into hiring them. After employers hire them, that's when the scheming starts. That's when management law firms give a little more context. Similarly, of course, unions, I think, are more careful about this. We'll put up a lot of know your rights pages. And then the last line at the end is, for more details, contact us. And again, it's because there's no benefit to management-side law firms or to the labor movement to be detailed in public about, here's a map to how to rob workers of their rights. It's a little too honest for management law firms, and for us, it's something that we would want to warn you about in a way that's discreet, in a way that makes sure that you're not vulnerable to walking into some kind of trap, right? So as a result, there's just not a lot of publicly accessible data on these nuances. And the internet, the large language models, they're trained based on data that's been published and a lot of data that's on the internet. It just sucks up all of that and then gives you the response based on what's most frequently said. And what's most frequently said is very, very basic, perhaps even a little more confident than it should be, and then asking people to contact somebody else to give them more context. So if that's the data that's available, that's the data that the bot is going to use as its training for when it tries to give you the most likely answer to your question. Other places where you get where that's training these large language models are Reddit, ministry guidelines. Reddit, there's a lot of misinformation on Reddit and a lot of incomplete information on Reddit. And ministry guidelines, again, they're encouraging companies to be compliant with the law, but they are guidelines, right? So a lot of times those ministry guidelines are, I wouldn't say they're not legally binding, but they're guidelines. So guidelines do allow for some evasion of enforcement. And so again, the bot, this is not always able to distinguish between have to and should, right? So that can sometimes create some problems. Let's move on. Okay. So there are some things that you should keep in mind if you decide that in advance of talking to Tozen or another union, you're going to ask a chatbot. First thing is, don't get distracted by the so-called hallucinations issue. So let's start with the fact that this issue of hallucinations, it's ableist to call it hallucinations. Hallucinations is a serious medical problem, and we don't really want to use terms like that, but it's also kind of inaccurate. In order to hallucinate, you have to be conscious. You have to be, you have to have a mental health, right? And also, what it describes as hallucinations, is actually just sort of saying things that aren't true or garbled language, and there might be a medical condition that's a little more analogous for that, but the main thing is that a lot of people say, oh, AI hallucinates all the time, but in my experience, I haven't had a lot of problems with just outright garbled language when I ask it a question. It's not the hallucinations I'm so concerned about. The thing that I'm concerned about is tone. So there's a problem where, because of the way the training data works and also the way that models are trained to appeal to you, there's a problem that AI experts actually talk about called sycophancy. So if you're the worker and you tell it you're the worker and AI wants to make you feel good about being the worker, then it's going to say things to you that might make you feel more confident or empowered. And that's all well and good, but it's actually not helpful if it's telling you what you want to hear. And the truth is, a lot of the consultations we have is where we give people a sober assessment of what the options really are and what the realistic options really are. So again, if you hear AI say, you've got all of these rights, you've got to go out there and assert your rights, and it doesn't give you the nuance, and it doesn't understand that the situation, that it's not the most helpful thing always to tell people what they want to hear, it could create some problems when you have the consultation and some darker truths about the situation are revealed. LLMs don't have work experience. So I'm not here to make you feel disempowered. I believe very strongly that there's a lot we can do, not just to enforce your legal rights, but to win things that aren't even in the catalog of your legal rights. But that is done most often through solidarity at the workplace and a great deal of hard work and collective work, time and effort. And that time and effort yields experience, and so we know where the traps are, and we know where the possibilities are, and we know which offices are the most helpful, which government offices, and we know which government offices maybe are less helpful. And this is not something that's been written out about extensively particularly in English in the Japanese context. So again, that's not in the training data. Also, I think that a lot of the training data suffers from all of the same biases that's in any publication, anywhere on the internet, is that it's not always sensitive to cultural contexts. So if it's looking for a likely response to advise you about what to do about a problem in English, it might be drawing, it's more likely to draw from English language, cultures in countries where they speak English, and the norms of how to handle labor problems in a country like Japan, in a country that's not in the West, it can be a lot different. And it's not even a West-East thing. There are going to be differences between English-speaking countries, and it's just not always accounted for. So these are things, this is a really tall ask to ask AI to, based on only publicly available data that's often biased, weirdly, shockingly, in favor of workers just because of where that information is, to ask it to take that information, moderate its desire to appeal to you so you keep using the product, to tell you what you want to hear, and also take account of experience that doesn't really get written about quite a lot. So yeah, that's stuff you want to keep in mind before you feel confident in the tone and the content that you're getting from an AI chatbot. Can we move on? Okay, so what's my advice? Well, again, I'll go back to what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to advise you not to use it because I'm actually beginning to believe that it's impossible. I picked Gemini for a reason. Unless you go into the settings and tell it not to do it, and most of us aren't going to do that, I haven't even done that, the first response you're getting now from Google is the AI response. And that, for instance, I'd say Google remains the most popular browser, therefore I think most of our consultations, it's Gemini that we get. But we also get a lot of people that like their ChatGPT account and use that. And again, like, it's not my place here in this in this presentation to say, don't use that, right? Get off my lawn, right? It's not going to work, and that I want to meet people where they are, and I know people are using this. But what I am going to say is that I really hope you're not one of those people that always believed everything you read on the internet before the advent of generative AI. Have skepticism. You should have skepticism of what you read on the internet. I would even be, I find it a welcome approach if people have skepticism to what they hear in labor consultations. Sometimes that creates a rather productive, collaborative, double checking of things. Have skepticism. Also, if you're using this to get an overview, some self-talk matters. This is an overview. There's probably context I don't know. Whatever field you work in, you know that if I ask AI about something in your field that I'm not an expert in, there's going to be a lot of missing context, and I might not know what questions to ask. And I don't want to have absolute faith that the AI is going to direct me, or the so-called AI is going to direct me, in the right way. So one of the good pieces of advice that it always gives you is to contact a labor organization, and it usually gives you some pretty good links. So even the AI is trained with this one bias that's actually really good. If you ask it, for my specific situation, it will, who can I talk to? It usually gives you at least a pretty good list, and those are great starting points. So take advantage of that. Another thing is that if you get an answer in English, ask it in Japanese, if you're capable of doing that. Even if you tell it in English to search Japanese sources, it's still not perfect. It's still going to bias itself towards English language cultures or the culture it thinks you have. It's still going to bias. It's still going to bias itself towards English language sources. Some people use these as translation. It's okay, I guess, but I would say if you are capable of at least having it double check in Japanese, please have it do that, or get a friend to help you do that. Again, it's probably just easier to email the union and we can talk about what you've read and fix any misconceptions that AI is promulgating. I also write CTFL, click the find links. So one thing AI chatbots have gotten better about is listing links where you can actually get the source material and then look for some of the stuff I told you about. Is this a management side law firm? What's its agenda? It's trying to scare up customers, so then maybe take that into account. Is it ministry guidelines? Well, look, does it say guideline or does it say these are the rules? You know, is this someone's Reddit page? Okay, Tozen members post to Reddit, so, and we check that stuff. It's usually accurate unless we've made a mistake, and if we do, then we are honest about it. But the problem is that not everyone has that, and a lot of people hear rumors and say things. If you're getting a Reddit link, I wouldn't say ignore it, but again, you'd have to vet it quite carefully. I also suggest you think about your prompts. So, you know, I consulted a couple of people who I would describe as experts in this field, and you know, they had some serious problems with how I worded the prompt that was the foundation for this presentation. And of course, I did that on purpose. That's the kind of question a human being would ask. And what's great about going to a consultation is if you ask me that question or one of our other organizers, we know how to interpret that question and how to ask you follow-up questions to find out, well, what's your situation? Have you had children before? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? But when I ask an AI chatbot for something, my first question is usually quite a human question, right? Maybe if you can give as much context as you can, and even ask it to give you a skeptical response that might take account of enforcement problems or other effects on your life of pursuing claims, particularly as an individual. The lack of experience AI has, actual real life experience AI has, might not allow it to give you a good answer. But by prompting it more skeptically, you're at least signaling to the technology, which is, some of it is programmed to be receptive to it, to that kind of prompting, that maybe you don't want to just, you know, be told what you want to hear. You also want to be told a more nuanced answer. So that's something you can do. And again, you know, I think that the final thing is, don't just ask it for more information. Ask it who you can talk to get more information. I think you should end any conversation that you have with that question. What human person can I talk to get more information? So I didn't include this on the advice page, but I do want to also point out that if AI advises you in any way, and AI advises you in any way to file a complaint somewhere, or confront management, or here's an email you can send to management, you need to ignore that advice. I've rarely found a situation where that advice is good. And also, you want to talk to somebody beforehand. All situations are different, and oftentimes the emails that are written, while they seem very well written, that's not the point. The point is, what impact is this going to have? You should get some context for that. So always talk to a person before you take action, certainly based on the advice you're getting from the chatbot. Can we move on? Yep. So, like I said, in conclusion, the useful prompt for all circumstances is who can I talk to about my specific situation. The other thing that I want to, confirm is that, well, not confirm, the other thing that I want to address is that after AI has spent some time, after ChatGPT or whatever has spent some time telling you, here are your rights, they're so strong, it's setting you up for some disappointment when you talk to somebody who says, okay, yeah, you have these rights, but here's how long the claim takes if you file it. Here is what it takes to organize a union. It could take a very long time to get the union together. It's hard work. We do our best to soften the blow and also to speak in a positive, encouraging way. Just because it's challenging to build a union doesn't mean it's not fun. But it does mean that the solution is not instant, and it often requires a lot of work from you. So before you go right from chatbot to consultation, check yourself emotionally. I might hear a different version of this. Yeah, One thing that I'll always agree with if AI says it is, for more information, contact Tozen Union, info@tozenunion.org. Labor unions in Japan are among the organizations that give consultations even to non-members. They're free, they're confidential, and when we don't know something or we're not confident in something, we usually know where we can find the information, where to refer you, or at the very least, we can be honest when we're flummoxed. What we don't want to do is over promise, here's what the law says, and what we want to also do is give you the resources to build a union, or if that's not the path you take, to at least advise you properly about where you might want to go and what you might want to do to resolve whatever issues you have. And so that is what I hope was a balanced evaluation and look at how these chatbots can possibly help you in advance of consultations, what to look out for, and of course some advice that if you must use them, or if you find yourself using them by default, what to look out for and how to maybe get the most out of them. And that is all from me. How long did I go, Oren?
Just over 30 minutes.
Just over 30 minutes, okay. So, Oren, we actually tried to record this before and had a failure, so this is our second attempt. But one thing I noticed is that because I had made my goal of 30 minutes and then I asked you for a question, we then turned it into 45 minutes. So, are there any burning questions you want to ask? Maybe we can take one or two, but we'll try to be brief. Oren is off camera today.
If I'm contacting the union, and after I've used sort of a LLM for advice, should I include the LLM's advice in my email?
That's a good question. So one thing, I'm going to reframe the question though, is what you should be telling us in your emails. So it'd be a really good idea to give, if you email the union for a consultation, to give a very simple summary of what your situation is. So for example, I work here, what you're comfortable with, of course, but let's say I work at this employer, this is my job, and this is the issue I'm dealing with. And I think that's enough. And then when you go to the consultation, be prepared with those details, but understand that consultations, we're going to narrow the focus. What I would say is that it would then be good if you shared with the organizer that you did consult AI. Please be honest about it. People are cagey about it. I did research. Just tell us if you're using it, because we're going to be able to tell pretty quickly. And what I think is more important is if there's something that you heard anywhere, whether or not it's from Gemini, for example, or from a friend, or from a resource online, or whatever, that seems to be in conflict with what you're being told by the organizer, that's the part you should bring up. So you'll find that there might be a lot of stuff like that where, oh, Gemini said this, I'm like, okay, but this is where it's getting it wrong and why. That's the same for anything else. I don't think you should send us like, here's everything AI said, because that's something we can talk about at the consultation. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else?
There was one question, but that's kind of, I think, already covered, actually.
Okay. Well, great. So, thank you for joining us for this. If you have questions about this, so you can contact us for a consultation. I suppose you can ask in the comments. We can check those. And yeah, thank you so much. Good luck be careful out there and good luck.